On April 21st, 1943, the doors of Harlem's best-loved ballroom, the Savoy, were padlocked. Both city and military authorities claimed that armed forces personnel had contracted venereal diseases from the women they met there. The real reason, angry Harlem residents charged, was that blacks and whites had not just danced together at the Savoy, but had gone home together. Hitler has scored a Jim Crow victory in New York, the Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. told his congregation. Closing down the Savoy was the first step toward segregation of the city. There were race riots over jobs and housing all across the North that summer. And in August, as Allied bombers pounded German cities, violence came to Harlem too. 6 were killed, 700 injured, and nearly 1,500 mostly white-owned shops were damaged or destroyed. The old dreams of the Harlem Renaissance were deferred again. Harlem was beginning to get a reputation among whites as a dangerous place. So dangerous that many jazz fans hesitated to visit it anymore.
Go to YouTube and go to the article, the share, go to the Check, check. Testing 1, 2, 3. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me. I'm Priest Ashagapan of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Since 1969, we've been going all over this earth, world, globe, whatever you want to call it, teaching that so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, and so-called Native Americans are the real children of God according to the Bible. We are the 12 tribes of Israel. We are the Israelites that you can read about in the Bible. All right? And today, joining me is priest and officer Aisha Ya'ala, holding down the computer, and Shamar. How you doing, Aisha Ya'ala?
Shalom, shalom. We're chilling over here.
Okay, most high in Christ, to everyone that's joining us today, to the brothers, Shalom, Yahweh Ba'Hashim Yahushai Barak Thumb, to the sisters, Yahweh Shamar Allah Thumb Ba'Hashim Yahushai. We're going to get it on today. About 2 weeks ago, we went over the Harlem race riots of 1943. Today, we're going to dive back into it, but we are going to explore how police and the politics of race and class played a big part of the riot, and from the 2 decades, from the 1940s all the way to the 1960s. All right. So what we're going to be using today is a regional labor review that I stumbled upon. If you share the screen and go to the actual last page of the PDF, yeah, just like that. Go to the last page of the PDF. Right? You can make it bigger, Boca, expand it. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Perfect, like that. Scroll down. Keep going all the way to the bottom. So this was from the Regional Labor Review, Volume 2, Number 2. It was from the spring and summer of 2002. So this was written about 24 years ago, right? From pages 29 and 37, this was from the copywritten in 2000 for the Center for the Study of Labor and Democracy at Hofstra University. And the person who wrote this by the name of Andrew Darian, at this time period when he wrote this piece, he was an adjunct instructor in the Department of Social Services and History at Fairleigh Dickinson University. I believe that's in what, Pennsylvania?
Jersey.
Jersey? Okay, in Jersey. And he also was a doctoral candidate in history right here at New York University, NYU. Scroll up just a bit. Now, these are some of the sources that he gets some of his information from that he's writing this review on. Let's read a few of them. You got number 5, which was from Newsweek. Everyone knows Newsweek, right? Newsweek is an article online, newspaper called Harlem Hoodlums, right? We got something from the Attorney General Urges from Amsterdam News, published in August 14, 1943, called Keep Negro in the Southland, right? We got, let's see, we have from F. Richardson, who wrote Police in America, Functions and Control, History and Crime Implications for Criminal Justice Policy, written in the 1980s. We have some other things that he cites from. Let's see what else. We have the New York City Department of Labor report on the recognition and organization of unionized police in New York City, right? From police unions in 1970s. We have, let's see, Robert M. Fogelson, who wrote The Big City Police from Harvard University Press from 1977. We have just a bunch of, we have 25 different sources that he gets his notes and cites from, right? Also by using the Bureau of Special Services, right? From the Office of War Information, the report of the Harlem race riots of 1943, right? So you scroll to the top. So these are just some of the 25 different sources that he gathers information from to write this regional labor review. And it's entitled, if you don't mind reading,
Police Fraternity and the Politics of Race and Class in New York City, 1941 to 1960.
So this is 2 years before the Harlem race riots of 1943. And it goes on for the next, 2 decades into the 60s. And it touches upon the actual race riots that happened in 43, goes into some specifics of it, and then it expounds into all these different topics that were factors in causing this race riot, and some of the things that were being done within the police and within politics and within the media leading up to the 60s, right? Yeah, actually even into the 80s, where he ends kind of his review on. So if you can, Baba Shah, let's go to page 2, right? And I would like for you to start off at the 3rd paragraph. We're going to start off at the 3rd paragraph, right there.
The official police report contends that Bandy threatened Collins and ran.
So now this is the information that's being taken from the police report that was filed by Officer Collins, who had the interaction with the black soldier Bandy at the hotel that sparked the TNT or the dynamite that led into the Harlem race riots of 1943. You go.
When he refused to halt, the patrolman drew and fired his revolver, wounding Bandy. Bandy, however, claimed that he had the officer's nightstick only because it was thrown at him. When he refused to relinquish the weapon, Collins shot him. For the purpose of this narrative, the truth about whether Collins or Bandy instigated the violence is less important than the potency of the story of police brutality to black New Yorkers.
Now, even though he's saying that it's not as important, it still is important, right? And it is important because the next sentence that Aishayala just read kind of gives you the imagery of the background that's happening, right? You can read a police report, you can read any report, but unless you have information that paints the environment of the incident, there's not much to really go on in terms of trying to understand what actually took place, right? So it says that the truth about whether Collins and Bandy instigated the violence is not as important when compared to the story of police brutality to black New Yorkers, right? Now, Bandy was a black man, a black soldier, who was visiting his mom, a black woman, at the same hotel where this woman was allegedly being harassed by the officer, this white officer named Collins from the 28th precinct of the NYPD. Now that we got that, we're going to dive into police brutality. Let's keep going.
That such a story could be true, and that such a story could be true.
Now, because of the environment, the atmosphere between police and black Hispanic relations, the story of Bandy having the nightstick being thrown at him and that being the reason why he had it and refusing to give it back to someone who's oppressing him or beating on him and then being shot by the white cop is kind of a believable story considering what was going on during this time period. Keep going.
And so often was in the lives of black New Yorkers.
Now this is true because many black New Yorkers during this era can attest to different types of police engagement that led to them feeling discriminated, oppressed by the NYPD. Keep going.
Speaks to the history of harassment of black soldiers, mistreatment of black women, and general abuse of black citizens by white police officers.
And this is something that we hear about even till this day, right? We had the whole civil rights movement, which highlighted many different inequalities amongst the races, especially when it came to politics and black and Hispanic people, police and black and Hispanic people. Keep going.
Single black women like Marjorie Polite in 1943 were accused of prostitution without cause.
Now, because Marjorie Polite was at this hotel, which had fallen in its respect and its reputation, and became a place where prostitutes did conduct their illegal sex works there. This woman Marjorie was suspected of being a sex worker. Keep going.
Robert Bandy's uniform afforded him no extra latitude in coming to his mother's defense.
And even though Bandy's mother, also a black woman, was trying to intervene in the handling of this other black woman, Marjorie, by the white officer Collins, Bandy, being a black soldier, you would think that he would have some type of honor. You would think there'll be some type of courtesy, right? But this white police officer showed him no courtesy, which is something that you still see today, where you see, well, there was a video that I'm pretty sure the world saw of this black man. He was outside, I think, of a bar, sitting down, smoking a cigarette, right? And these two white cops were approaching him, talking to him, saying that he looked or fit the description of a suspect, and this man's friends were filming him. And unbeknownst to these two white officers, this black man was actually a black FBI agent. And he's there going back and forth with these two white officers. And you can see the unprofessionalism that they demonstrated, how they discriminated based on his appearance, right? When upon looking at his wallet and finding out he was an FBI agent, there was hardly any sincere apology, right? You see a video of a soldier, a black soldier who's in his car at a gas station being stopped by white police officers. And he's getting pepper spray or having the OC spray on him while inside his car at the gas station. He ended up suing, right, the police station, the police officers. So there is no, this is something that is not uncommon even till this day, where black and Hispanic people who are either in law enforcement or in the military still struggle to have some type of respect or professional courtesy from their white counterparts. You go.
James Collins' uniform and white skin, however, gave him the right to harass Marjorie Polite.
Repeat that again.
James Collins' uniform and white skin, however,
Even though Bandy was a black man and was in a uniform, an army uniform, it did not outweigh James Collins' uniform as an NYPD officer and the fact that he was a white man. Keep going.
gave him the right to harass Marjorie Polite, verbally abuse Florine Roberts, and shoot Robert Bandy. Even the Office of War Information, which had no stake in defending the riots, noted the symbolic importance of such a confrontation.
So the Bureau of Special Services, the Office of War Information, made it a point that they made this comparison of Bandy being a black soldier in uniform and Collins being a white officer in uniform. They made it a point to draw this comparison to how important it was in the environment, to the atmosphere that, let's just call the Harlemites, black and Hispanic residents felt from white police officers, the NYPD, specifically the 28th precinct at this time. Keep going.
Quote, the resentment of Negroes has been mounting with reports of Negro servicemen.
What?
The resentment of Negroes has been mounting with reports of Negro servicemen.
So the black people living here, the reports of how fed up they are, especially amongst black servicemen, were just increasing due to their interactions with the NYPD, specifically with white officers. Keep going.
Showing disrespect for one's mother is a grievous insult in any man's language. To this must be linked the widely held belief that white men refuse to respect Negro women. The widely held belief that white men refuse to respect Negro women. White police are often brutal and carelessly abusive in their dealings with Negroes.
Now that exact quote was actually taken and used from the Bureau of Special Services Office of War Information. It was a quote directly from there. They made it a point to acknowledge that white police officers, it's widely held that they did not respect black women and that they were extremely brutal and carelessly abusive when dealing with black people or Hispanic people, people of color. This is something that they found it worthy to cite in their report. All right, keep going. Wait, go back to the screen and see if there's any questions, anything like that. Okay, all right, sir, keep going.
Brother said that your mic is harder to hear and sounds a little low.
Check, check. Check, check, check. Okay. Let's continue.
The press also advanced the view that the typical rioter was a young black male or hoodlum.
Say it again.
The press also.
Now, this is always a big problem because the press tends to cast such a negative light on black people, Hispanic people, people of color. So here, the press is doing their job of continuing to shed a negative light on our people. Keep going.
Also advanced the view that the typical rioter was a young black male or hoodlum.
They called us what?
Hoodlum.
So the press, the media, the newspaper, the radio stations proceeded to call the rioters of 1943 here in Harlem to be hoodlums. Keep going.
Seeking to loot, bum, and steal. Press accounts neatly contrasted their vision of demonic black men.
What?
Press accounts neatly contrasted their vision of demonic black men.
So they had a vision that they wanted, that they portrayed throughout the media so that everyone can get a hold of. They showed the vision of demonic black men. Like they had to vilify them and demonize these black men, these hoodlums, compared to what?
With the peaceful Harlemite.
With the peaceful Harlemites. Keep going.
For example, Newsweek was quick to note that while most of the 300,000 inhabitants, despite economic handicaps and overcrowding, are law-abiding citizens, Harlem contained a jungle of cheap, poisonous liquor, marijuana, and muggings, which are the source of the city's major sociological problem.
So they said that even though most of the 300,000 Harlemites, right, the inhabitants of Harlem, despite the fact that there's such economic hardships, despite the fact of the overcrowding, right, despite the fact that all of these things, they're still law-abiding citizens. But Harlem was still a jungle of cheap, poisonous liquor and marijuana and muggings, which are at the source of the city's major crimes or sociological problems. You know, economic hardship can cause drug use, can cause muggings with people trying to survive. You know, people who are depressed, what they often do, they turn to alcohol, they turn to drug use, they turn to crime, trying to find a way to survive. So it's kind of like they're stating what the issues are, but are disregarding that those issues can cause these problems. Keep going.
The New York Times reported that gangs of young hoodlums formed in the streets, identifying rioters as being in their late teens or early 20s, wearing zoot suits.
Wearing what?
Zoot suits.
Now, we also had a similar class where we talked about zoot suits and the zoot suit riots that happened in California, in Los Angeles. Keep going.
A white police officer lambasted the rioters.
What?
A white police officer lambasted the rioters.
So this is what a white police officer had to say about the rioters.
Quote, looting is just a natural instinct.
What?
That looting is just a natural instinct.
This white police officer of the, right, let's just say the 28th precinct, he said that looting was just a natural instinct. Keep going.
They, blacks, just don't know better.
That us black folk, we don't know any better. It's a natural instinct for us to loot, to riot, right? It's a natural instinct of ours to go and act like animals because we don't know better. It's our natural instinct. Keep going.
They're just like savages.
They're what?
They're just like savages.
This white police officer, this white NYPD officer called black and brown rioters, protesters, savages. Continue.
Don't belong in a civilized country, in my estimation.
And that we didn't belong in a civilized country. Now, let's not forget that this country was a civilized country. It had Native Americans, so-called Native Americans living here, running their own territories and everything. It wasn't until the so-called oppressor, sorry, not the so-called, he is the oppressor. It wasn't until the oppressor, the colonizer, the conquistadors, the Europeans, when they came over here, where they started to destroy this land and this country. Right? Keep going.
They belong back in a tree.
What?
They belong back in a tree.
So this white police officer in the 40s basically said that we were monkeys and that we belong back in the trees because we're animals. Keep going.
The only thing missing is a tail.
A what?
A tail.
If you didn't believe me the first time, here it goes. Us black people, us Hispanic people belong back in the trees, and that the only thing missing from us are tails, because he's calling us monkeys. He's calling us savages. He's saying that we are based in our instincts, and that it is natural for us to act like animals. Keep going.
Another officer put it more bluntly. Quote, they should have brought in a couple of machine guns and mowed them down.
What?
They should have brought in a couple of machine guns and mowed them down.
So this is what officers in the NYPD thought about black and brown people protesting and rioting in 1943 here in Harlem, that they should have brought in machine guns and unalived us. Keep going.
Such views of the riot as the product of wild young black men served to deny any possibility that Harlem's diverse black community, even the respectable middle class, harbored resentment towards white privilege.
But none of them would think that, well, maybe the reason why they're acting this way is because of how they are being treated. And no one even bothered to think from our perspective of how white people gain certain advantages just because they are white. Now, here we are in 2024, and this is still a common issue all over this country, especially in metropolis all over the world, from Chicago to Los Angeles to Houston to Miami to Detroit to Boston, right here in New York City. This is still a constant theme that black and Hispanic people have to deal with when engaging with the NYPD, and especially with the white residents and white citizens of this city. Keep going.
Instead of legitimizing the grievances borne out in the rioting, uneasy white politicians and police officers chose to cast all civil rights protests as ominous.
So they didn't want to actually to consider and to take into the account the causes of this riot. They did not want to acknowledge the harsh conditions of economic freedom or economic stability, food stability. They did not want to acknowledge the price gouging of rental properties, right? They did not want to admit to any wrongdoing from the police that would make us feel that we're being abused and discriminated against by police officers. But instead, they chose to cast any type of civil rights protest in a bad light. Like, this is not good. This is something that is uncalled for, not needed. They're just being rebellious. They're going back to their basic instincts, like being a savage and just trying to loot, steal, and act like bums and hoodlums. This is the thought of many. This is the thought of some white politicians and the NYPD. Keep going.
They invoked the idea of a thin blue line, which stood as a precarious barrier between the law-abiding and the rabble. Without an empowered police department, police officials contended, New York would fall prey to thugs and delinquents.
So they wanted to have more power to the police departments, to the NYPD, because without this power, without the ability to control the city, their stance was, the police officials said that New York City would just fall into disarray, will fall into prey to all these thugs and these delinquents and these hoodlums and these savages. Keep going.
At the center of that problem, they argued, were black and Puerto Rican males.
Say it again.
At the center of that problem,
at the very center of this issue that's plaguing New York City, all the problems that New York City is facing in crime is because of who?
Black and Puerto Rican males.
It's because of these black and Puerto Rican men. They're the real issue. They're the spine of the issues that are plaguing New York City. And things must be done. Things must be done to put these black and Hispanic men in order, put them in check, in order to reduce the crime that's in New York City. Keep going.
U.S. Attorney General Francis Biddle went so far as to suggest that President Roosevelt take steps to halt black migration to northern cities.
Right? He wanted the president to stop the newly freed slaves, right? Who had just had been freed. What was it? 1918? No, 18. No. What I'm trying to say is the Emancipation Proclamation happened in 1863, 64, 65, around there, right? But what was the year of Juneteenth? Alexa, what year was June? What year did the Juneteenth take place?
Juneteenth, also known as June 19th, commemorates the end of slavery in the United States. It started in 1865 when General Granger announced...
Alexa, stop. Right, so from 1865, where slaves, especially in the South, were being finally told that they're free, you start to see a big mass migration in the early 1900s, and they did not want all this big exodus of freed black people leaving in the South, going up to northern cities into the northwest, right? And the U.S. Attorney General wrote to the president at that time that he wanted to put a pause on this black migration, to keep these black people in the South, because again, they're saying that black men and Puerto Rican men were the problems of all these crimes. They were the reason that we're having all these crimes. Keep going.
Slack it. Ironically, it was the perceived virtues of black Southern labor that seemed to have been at the heart of his statement. Biddle's recommendation was consistent with the wishes of Southern plantation owners and Dixie industrial employers who were alarmed over the large numbers of black workers leaving the South.
Right, because the the plantation owners, who were the slave owners of these plantations, and the different businesses that grew and depended on slave labor and black labor, they started to see a decrease in their business because of how many black people were leaving the South going to the North. Continue.
The Bureau of Special Services and the U.S. Office of War Information attempted to reveal the real story of the riots.
So this is where the Bureau Special Services in the U.S. Information of War, the U.S. Office of War Information, this is where they decided to step in and to do research on the causes of this riot. Keep going.
Immediately following the uprising, the Bureau sent one white and two black military police officers to interview Harlem's white and black residents respectively. In contrast to the press accounts, differences in the narratives of local citizens recorded by the Bureau reveal the ways in which black and white New Yorkers imagined black Harlem.
What's it again?
Revealed the ways in which black and white New Yorkers imagined black Harlem.
So right here we're going to get the idea of white citizens and how they envision Harlem, and then black citizens and how they envision Harlem. Keep going.
For example, white New Yorkers who could only envision rioters as ominous young black men attributed the riots to hoodlums and gangs of youngsters in their teens.
Right? Because this is all they knew. Because who lived in Harlem during the 1940s? Keep in mind, this is the era of World War II, right? When the white population was very small in Harlem, but the black and brown population was extremely high. So when you're asking white New Yorkers, they're not giving you they're giving you their honest opinion from what they see, because they are not living and experiencing what black and Hispanic people are experiencing in Harlem. However, when you ask black and Hispanic people what they're experiencing, what they envision Harlem, you're going to see a completely contrasting view. And here, white New Yorkers are saying that when they envision the rioters, they are what?
Hoodlums and gangs of youngsters in their teens.
Right. they looked at them in a very negative light, calling them hoodlums and gang members. Keep going.
Blacks, though, attributed the riots to people of all ages, including children, women, and members of the well-dressed middle class.
Right, but black people, us, when we were asked how we envisioned Harlem, especially during the riot, they said it was everyone. Children were there, teens were there, women were there, black people who are well off in the upper class, middle class, right, wearing suits and ties. We all took part in this because we all were experiencing the same issues. Keep going.
Another important difference among the interviewees was that whites tended to see the riot as a rampage against law and order, while blacks saw it as an expression of the racial conflict.
Right, because white people, they're not being oppressed like we are. The United States government is telling you that white people are not being oppressed like black and Hispanic people are. They're telling you that white people viewed us in such a negative light instead of actually understanding that the reason why we acted out in such a manner was because we had reached a boiling point that we can no longer maintain ourselves in light of the discrimination, the segregation, the inequalities in labor and real estate, and trying to find places to live, quality of education. They viewed us as a rampage against law and order. However, us black and Hispanic people, we looked at it as a boiling point, the climax of racial conflict, racial tension. That this was because of all the atrocities that we were facing, that we were under. Keep going.
Whites interviewed saw the riots as an illustration of blacks' natural lawlessness.
What?
Saw the riots as an illustration of blacks' natural lawlessness.
So white people thought that this was our natural way of acting, that we were just naturally lawlessness. We naturally don't abide by the law. We naturally don't abide by order. Keep going.
While blacks, Salakia,
You gotta stay on point,
and
right?
the primitive traits of Negroes. Conversely, blacks identified the shooting of a black soldier as an extension of hated Southern practices and violence at the hands of the police.
Right. So while white people are comparing us to animals and basic instincts and having primitive instincts, us black and Hispanic people are saying that the way we acted during this day was because of the unwarranted shooting of another black man, which just kept promoting the hatred of Southern practices, right? And the violence that we normally are accustomed to and are at the receiving end from white police officers in the NYPD. Keep going.
From the point of view of black Harlemites, the riots were racially motivated political acts.
Right. Okay. Let's go to the next, not the next paragraph, the paragraph after, but black New Yorkers.
But black New Yorkers would not let the NYPD disregard the implicit message of the riots. Hoping to bring the pressure of the White House to bear on the LaGuardia administration and Commissioner Valentine, black New Yorkers wrote to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. They explained to her that poor police-community relations and future riots could be prevented by increasing the number of black policemen and their opportunities for advancement.
So some of the leaders of black and Hispanic back then thought that one of the ways to prevent discrimination is to have more black and brown people in the police force. They thought that by having a greater presence of people who look like the general public of that area in the police force, could help with the discrimination, can help with the abuse that Black and Hispanic people faced. And they thought that it was a good idea to write to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, because apparently she was some champion for Black civil rights. Keep going.
They explained to her, Salakia, the president's wife, known as a champion of Black civil rights, urged that the NYPD hire more Black police officers, advising Mayor LaGuardia that, quote, there might be fewer such instances as the past regrettable one.
See, they made this white woman the champion for Black people because she had a reputation of fighting for civil rights. She had a reputation for promoting Black equality. So our Black and Hispanic brothers and sisters back in the 40s made this white woman the champion for their causes. Like we made John F. Kennedy the champion for our causes. Like we made Bill Clinton a champion for us because he played the saxophone and smoked weed. Like some people now are trying to make Donald Trump the champion for Black and Hispanic people now, right? We are always trying to find a champion or trying to make someone that represents our oppressor the champion for us because we do not believe that the Lord can be our champion. Instead of having someone that looks like us, thinks like us, has suffered like us, that has struggled like us, be a champion for us, we want our oppressor to be our champion. Because maybe if the white man sees another white person fighting for us, it might give us a better chance of winning. Now, you may think about all these great Black and people of color from the civil rights movement and era. Well, what about Dr. Martin Luther King? He was a champion for civil rights. Yeah, he was such a champion that integration has caused the decline of Black and brown owned businesses. Martin Luther King Jr. was such a champion for Black civil rights that because of integration, we have seen a dramatic decrease in the honorability of Black universities and colleges. You can go online right now and see the poor condition that many Black establishments and institutions of higher learning have suffered after integration, right? You can see how the dreams that Martin Luther King Jr. said he had have actually become nightmares like he said it had. So Martin Luther King was not a champion for Black civil rights. He was a destroyer of whatever type of equality we could have had. Equality is not being able to shop at a white-owned establishment. Equality is not being able to eat a cheeseburger at a white restaurant. Equality is not being able to take a crap on a white toilet and drink from a white water fountain. Equality is being able to have your own and rival in contrast to your oppressor. It was equality that we had our own Black-owned movie theaters. It was absolutely equality that we had our own water fountains for us colored people. It was absolutely equal to have our own Black institutions, our own Black-owned businesses. That was equality. Being able to have our own. Instead, Martin Luther King destroyed all of that with him being the champion for civil rights for black people. Keep going.
In 1943, the NYPD was a predominantly white institution.
What?
Was a predominantly white institution.
So in the 1940s, white people basically ran the police department. Keep going.
Of the 16,000 police officers in the department, only 155 were black.
Wow.
Including only 6 sergeants, 1 parole commissioner, and 1 surgeon. LaGuardia blamed the shortage of black policemen on the restraints of war.
Of what?
On the restraints of war.
So the Mayor LaGuardia said that the reason why there was such a low count of black representation in the police force at this time was because of the war, of World War II. Keep going.
And the lack of black applicants to the police force.
And that there was such a low number of black people applying to the NYPD. Keep going.
Disregarding how the police reputation among blacks was an important impediment to their taking police recruitment seriously.
Why would black people and Hispanic people during this time want to join the police force when they're living through the police abuse and discrimination? That's like saying you don't want to be a dentist because your experience of being a dentist has always been you receiving the worst treatment possible, you suffering multiple incidents of malpractice by dentists, and now someone is saying that the reason why there is not a lot of black or Hispanic dentists is because there are no black and Hispanic people applying to be dentists, and you're not considering the fact that we have had a overall negative experience going to the dentist. Well, the reason why black and Hispanic people were not applying to work for the NYPD in the 1940s, 1930s, 1950s was because of the harsh experiences that we have been living through that were caused and inflicted upon us by members of the NYPD. Keep going.
He also pointed to earlier remarks by some Harlem residents that black police officers were too rough.
That what?
That black police officers were too rough.
So he also goes on to say that, well, the black police officers that we do have, they're just too rough. Well, you know why? Because one of the first black people allowed to be police officers, I believe it was, I think in the South, they were not allowed to arrest white people. They were only allowed to arrest black people. And they were encouraged to be harsh and treat people harshly. So it makes sense that there's 155 black police officers in this police organization dominated by white people. They would have the pressure to be accepted by their white counterparts, which means that they would have to act like them or even worse. Keep going.
As historian Dominic Capecci notes, LaGuardia found it easier to attribute the shortage of black policemen to inadequate funds and manpower shortages due to the war than to racism.
It was easy for LaGuardia to blame these reasons on the shortage of black police officers, the war, money, funding, all of this, but he wouldn't acknowledge racism. Keep going.
LaGuardia's biographer, Thomas Kessner, sees the mayor as underestimating the race problem, and that, like every other mayor before and after him, responded to racial problems when they became too dangerous to ignore, but offered no direct programs to solve them.
And this was the trend before LaGuardia, after LaGuardia, that something was done. Something was done when it was too late, and there was nothing put in place to prevent things like this from happening again. Keep going.
In sum, Mayor LaGuardia and Commissioner Valentine excused their poor record in hiring black police, but planned to prevent future rioting by finding a place for blacks in police work. Valentine attempted to deflect criticisms of black exclusion from police work by denying discrimination outright while calling for New Yorkers to opt for patriotism instead of division.
Right? Police Commissioner Valentine, he didn't want to talk about the discrimination. He would rather people focus on patriotism. He wanted to shift attention from the discrimination that Black and Hispanic people were experiencing by the police force, and saying that we are being distracted by these issues. And we need to focus on America and winning the war and being patriots and coming together. Keep going.
Valentine laid out a utopian vision of New York as a city free of racial, ethnic, religious, and class conflict. New Yorkers were simply united by their identity as Americans. For Valentine, crime and law enforcement were colorblind.
Or what?
Were colorblind.
Yeah, because this white man is delusional.
Right.
He wanted to deny what's happening right in front of his face. Right? Skip that. Go down to the next paragraph.
Harlemites' responses to street patrol spoke loudly about who they wanted policing their community.
Right? Because take a wild guess on who was patrolling the neighborhoods of Harlem.
Right.
White people, white police officers. And the people of Harlem, who were majority Black and Hispanic, they wanted people who looked like them enforcing the laws in their neighborhood. Keep going.
On the Monday after the riots, the rioting crowds paused and cheered when a contingent of Black military police appeared on the scene.
Say that again.
On the Monday after the riots, the rioting crowds paused and cheered when a contingent of Black military police appeared on the scene.
So when Black men in uniform came marching through Harlem, Black and Hispanic people cheered because they felt that finally we're getting people that look like us, that can sympathize with us and understand what we're going through. They're coming here and they're going to know how to treat us. Keep going.
Conversely, when a group of white military police arrived,
however, when white police officers from the military were marching in the same area, keep going,
they were jeered and bombarded with rocks and bottles.
Yeah, they didn't want them there because they knew that these white people didn't represent them. These white military police officers did not come from their community. Cannot relate to the problems that they go through. Keep going.
The next day, the U.S. Army and the NYPD agreed to add a force of 1,500 mostly Black civilian volunteers.
Now, keep this in mind and read it again.
The next day, the U.S. Army and NYPD agreed to add a force of 1,500 mostly Black civilian volunteers. City authorities recruited the Black volunteers and equipped them with nightsticks and armbands to help 6,000 members of the NYPD and the military police. Among the civilian volunteers who patrolled the Harlem streets were 300 Black women armed with clubs and wearing armbands to identify them as upholders of law and order.
Now remember, they thought it was a great idea to hire or to bring on board 1,500 mostly Black civilian volunteers, because they saw the response that the Black military police had when they came to the neighborhood, and they felt, well, if we had them, we can get the similar response if that the people saw people who looked like them policing and patrolling their neighborhood. Keep going.
Although LaGuardia and Valentine were reluctant to hire Black police officers,
They were what?
Were reluctant to hire Black police officers.
They really didn't want to hire Black police officers. That's why they had volunteers. Keep going.
They could find a place for Black men and women in police work by assigning them temporary status as upholders of law and order. Rather than incorporate Blacks as regular, fully paid members of the NYPD, they included them as special units, specifically designed for riot control.
Yeah, so they didn't want to really have Black people in the police department. They only utilized the special unit when there were riots, to control riots. So when Black and Hispanic people were still being oppressed and discriminated against and abused by white police officers, and it came to the tipping point again, and things went out of control because of this oppression, then they would bring in the black civilians, the black volunteers to help keep the riot under control. Keep going.
New York's black communities repeatedly complained about the dearth of blacks in the police department. Furthermore, a housing department survey found that police bias was the single biggest obstacle to a healthy relationship between blacks and city authorities.
And it still is today. That has not changed. How many decades have gone by? 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, now in 2020s. What's that? 8 decades, 9 decades later? And that is still an issue between black and Hispanic people living in New York City and the police department. Even though there has been a great increase of minorities and people of color in the NYPD, we're still finding that there is a bias, an obstacle that stands in the way between us and the police department, even with our own people being represented in the police department. Keep going.
The report suggested that the police assigned to Harlem were often men from outside the community.
Repeat, say that again.
The report suggested that the police assigned to Harlem were often men from outside the community who took no real interest in the residents.
And that's an issue that still goes on today, right? How can you employ a white boy that grew up in a white neighborhood in Long Island to come police in the 28th precinct in Harlem, or the 32nd precinct in Harlem, or the 34th, or the 25th, or the 23rd? How can you employ a Chinese boy that grew up in Chinatown to come police Harlem? That's a big issue. These people who have their own values, who grew up in their own communities, did not bring any value to the areas that they were working in. They had no investments in the areas that they're working in. They were not from the neighborhood, therefore they did not care about the neighborhood. They didn't care of how they interacted with people. Keep going.
So strained were the relations between the community and the police that Harlemites likened the NYPD to a racist army of occupation.
And that is what has been the idea between us and them for decades. Keep going.
Residents complained of police breaking into their apartments without warrants, conducting illegal searches of persons and property, and employing gratuitous violence.
And this is something that goes on even till today. Stop and frisk. What do you think that was? Illegal searches and seizures. All the reports that came out of those black and Hispanic people being thrown up against brick walls and slammed over car hoods and just being stopped and frisked while walking in the streets of Manhattan and Harlem and the Bronx, and nothing being found, right? All this discrimination, this racism, these policies, these procedures that are put in place that have caused us to be fearful of the NYPD still happens today, right? And you do have some men and women in the NYPD that have great intentions, right? That did grow up in our neighborhoods, that are from Hispanic communities and black communities and understand the struggles that our people face. And they are within the NYPD. But it's still difficult to change the overall mentality that the NYPD has had since its inception towards black and Hispanic people. It's difficult to change that. It's ingrained even during the police academy, right? The police force was predominantly ran by Irish, and we all know how the Irish treated black people and Hispanic people during the draft riots. That was predominantly Irishmen committing these atrocities against black people, right? Fast forwarding to today, us black and Hispanic people still have this perception of the NYPD as being an enemy, as being an aggressor, as being an oppressor, because of the experiences that we still witness year after year, decade after decade. And it is a rocky uphill battle that many people in the police force who are Black and Hispanic have to deal with when trying to change this narrative. But you know what could just be easier? Is if you never joined the police force.
Right.
And you started to obey God's laws, statutes, and commandments. Because when you obey God's laws, statutes, and commandments, you don't go to your oppressor to seek justice. You wouldn't have to write to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt because she was the champion for Black civil rights. You don't have to go to our oppressor. You will just turn to the Lord. Do you think that the narcotics division of the NYPD would exist and run throughout the neighborhoods of Black and Hispanic people if we did not engage in distribution, use, and selling of drugs? Imagine if all of Harlem, all Black and Hispanic people of Harlem stopped selling drugs and stopped using drugs. There will be no purpose for the narcotic division of the NYPD to exist in Harlem. Imagine if Black and Hispanic people did not use firearms to unlawfully unalive someone else. There will be no homicide squad of the NYPD. Imagine if we did not engage in illegal practices and businesses. Imagine if we did not engage in the distribution of illegally distributing firearms, tobacco, alcohol, explosives. There would be no need for ATF to be in Harlem. Imagine if we did not engage in human trafficking and sex trafficking and prostitution and pimping. There would be no need for all these special victim units of the NYPD to be in Harlem, because we would be upholding the laws of God, which go against all these type of things. There will be no need for the NYPD to walk through Harlem if the residents of Harlem were God-abiding citizens. Forget law-abiding citizens, because you could obey the law and find a loophole to do something that's immoral and hurts a lot of people, but it still be legal for you to have done. If Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans were God-abiding people, there will be no need for the NYPD in Harlem. And if you really want that to be a goal, if you really want, as a Black, Hispanic, and Native American people, you really want the NYPD here in Harlem to disappear, to go away, for their buildings to be turned, for their police stations to be turned into apartment buildings, affordable housing, schools. It starts with you, us, obeying the laws of God. By obeying God, we wouldn't have to worry about the issues that force police to be in your neighborhood. Keep going. Actually, let's look at the comments real quick. Okay, cool. All right, keep going.
Most white police considered Harlem the Siberia of the department.
Say that again.
Most white police considered Harlem the Siberia of the department.
So in the 1940s, right? I don't know if anyone knows where Siberia is. Siberia is located, I believe, northwest Russia.
East, way.
East? Is it east? I thought it's not northwest. Google it real quick. I thought it was northwest, Siberia.
Siberia is like near the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, it'd be north. Sorry, yes, yeah. I'm thinking northeast and I'm saying northwest. You're absolutely right. I'm thinking northeast, but I'm saying northwest. Siberia is in the northeast of Russia, and it is ridiculously cold. Like hardly no agriculture grows up there. Like think of the desert, but just frigid. Snow everywhere, unbearably cold temperatures. No one wants to go to Siberia, to those prisons in Russia. That's what white police officers considered Harlem, the Siberia of New York City, Harlem. No one wants to be sent there to go work. Keep going.
Police officers who were believed to be drunkards or of doubtful character.
Go back to the first sentence.
Most white police considered Harlem the Siberia of the department, a place where one would be banished for bad behavior.
So if you were getting written up on the job and not doing things correctly, you would be punished by being sent to Siberia, aka Harlem. Keep going.
Police officers who were believed to be drunkards or of doubtful character would often be punished by an assignment to the 28th precinct.
And the 28th precinct is right here. I believe that's Frederick Douglass or Adam Clayton Powell and 121st, 122nd Street. They considered it a punishment to be sent to go work up here in Harlem. Keep going.
The Office of War Information's report on the riots found that officers accused of viciousness, brutality, or graft are often assigned to the Harlem precinct.
Now, isn't that a coincidence, right? You have black people, Hispanic people complaining about the abuse from the NYPD at the 28th precinct, complaining about the discrimination, the harsh treatment, and the U.S. Office of Information. The U.S. Office of War Information just reported and stated that officers who were accused of viciousness, of brutality, were sent to work in Harlem. So white police officers who were in trouble because they were abusive to people, they discriminated against people, they would harm people in the course of their duty, they were sent to Harlem right here. They were sent up here, and they were doing the same exact things because our people were saying that they were doing those things. You're telling on yourself. You're admitting without trying to say clearly that the 28th precinct of the NYPD back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, the white police officers were abusing and mistreating black and Hispanic people here in Harlem. That is a fact. Now, although things have changed, it's 2024. There's a pretty decent Dominican man who's the commanding officer in the 28th precinct. You have some decent community affairs officers who are black and Hispanic working over there. You know, you have some lieutenants and sergeants who are black and Hispanic descent who are over there, right? And you can actually visibly see the efforts that police department, the 28th precinct, the different things that they're doing to be more community oriented, to be more friendly towards the people here in Harlem. That's great. But back then, our people were complaining about these things because it was factual of what was happening. The people who were abusing people were being sent to Harlem, the 28th precinct, and were still abusing the public. Keep going.
Black police officers were profoundly ambivalent about their place in patrol work.
Yeah, they didn't know what side of the to stay on. Should we align ourselves with the people that we represent, or should we or should we go on the side of the NYPD and these white officers? Keep going.
The few black police officers in the NYPD shared many of the goals of those in the black community, but had a somewhat more conflicted position regarding their sole assignments in ghetto beats.
Yeah, because, you know, anyone that's looking for an advancement in a career, they don't want to be stuck in the worst positions. They want to be able to have room to grow. Keep going.
The NYPD hired its first black police officer in 1891 and placed almost every subsequent officer in Harlem's 28th and 32nd precincts or Bedford-Stuyvesant's 79th. Because police officials viewed these precincts with disdain and often contributed little manpower and resources to them, black police officers understood that these were less desirable posts.
Can you give me a piece of tissue napkin, Bubba Shaw? Right? So police officers working in these different police precincts, they saw the little effort that was given and attention that was given and the manpower that was given to these different, to these different units. So therefore, they too did not want to work there because they also want career advancement. You can't blame them, right? Keep going.
They also knew the clustering of black police officers in these three precincts meant that blacks would have fewer opportunities for promotion. Departments which excluded blacks, like the Detectives Bureau and Police Headquarters, were the prime areas for advancement. Black officers were aware of their complicity in controlling the black community, bargaining with black criminals, and taking the pressure off white cops. They understood the terms under which NYPD brought them into the department. One such officer, Robert Magnum, began organizing fellow officers from Harlem's 28th precinct into a Guardian Association in 1943 because he thought the NYPD was oblivious to the concerns of the black officer and unresponsive to ghetto unrest.
So this black man, Robert Magnum, decided to create this group, this organization for black and Hispanic people called the Guardian Association, because of the disparities of resources that were given to them and how the unrest inside Harlem was not getting the attention it deserved. Keep going.
But recruitment for Magnum's association initially proved difficult. Some black officers criticized Magnum for creating a divisive issue in wartime, while others feared recrimination from supervisors in the NYPD who saw the group as a challenge to police fraternity.
Right, because this is something that we see now. If you're a police officer, you gotta stand behind that blue wall of silence, right? If you are a whistleblower in the NYPD and you are pointing out crimes and illegal activities that are happening in the police in the NYPD, you get ostracized. You get targeted as being a traitor or a snitch. So this is what they were thinking as an obstacle to wanting to join the Guardian Association that this black police officer started to create. Keep going.
Because of these fears, Magnum and his supporters met secretly at the Harlem YMCA until the late 40s.
And because of this, because of the fears of being discovered and the consequences that would come down upon them, they had to meet in hiding. Keep going.
After the war, with the support of Harlem Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., the Guardians pressured the city for recognition of their organization. After initial opposition, Commissioner William O'Brien acknowledged the charter of the Guardians in 1949. Ethnic fraternal associations were a long-established part of the department before the Guardians.
Yeah, because you had the Irishmen who dominated the police force. You had Jewish people that were in there. You got Italian people that you had all these different people in the police force before black and Hispanic people were allowed to be police officers. Keep going.
Jewish police officers in the Shomron Society in 1924, Italian officers in the Columbia Association in 1932 had formed their organizations to represent the special needs of their ethnic groups.
And they all created they all created these groups to serve their people, right? But it was an issue when a black person wanted to create a group for black people to serve the issues of black people. It was an issue then. Keep going.
With the establishment of the Guardians, Irish officers also began to think about an explicit ethnic identity within the department. Previously, Irish identity was normalized in the NYPD. So many police officers were Irish, it did not make sense to any of them to form a fraternal organization.
Yeah, because the Irish were the police. Keep going.
Furthermore, as exemplified by the cartoon below, Irish officers had little difficulty getting white officers of other ethnic backgrounds to join the Irish parade.
Everyone would go to the Irish parade, the NYPD parade. They played whenever the NYPD marches in any parade. You see them with bagpipes, and there'll be everyone there. Jewish people marching with the Irish, Italian people marching with the Irish, Black, Hispanic people marching with the Irish, Asian and Indian descent marching with the Irish. Everyone marching with the Irish and the NYPD, because the NYPD is still ran by Irish people. Keep going.
Commissioner O'Brien, himself Irish, complained that the formation of a Black Guardian organization was a political act and subsequently would interfere with Black officers' ability to objectively enforce the law. However, he remained quiet when Irish patrolmen and officers joined the newly formed Emerald Society in 1953. It was, they claimed, merely a fraternal organization. Many Hispanic police officers immediately joined the Guardians. When the Hispanic Society was formed in 1957, many of its members retained their affiliation with the Guardians, thus refusing to reduce their identities to one ethnic or racial category.
Facts, because we're brothers. Black and Hispanic people need to stick together. Black, Hispanic, and Native American people, we are the same race of people. Keep going.
New York's Black community challenged not only their underrepresentation in police work, but the brutal practices of officers themselves, which remained a cogent issue throughout the 40s and 50s.
It remained a predominant issue. The abusiveness that our people faced from white officers was an issue from the 40s and 50s. Keep going.
For some Black leaders, hiring Black police officers was the key to preventing brutality. Representative Powell became a major player in agitating for more Black police officers and holding the department accountable for its brutality. Black and Puerto Rican political groups in Harlem, the Lower East Side, and Bedford-Stuyvesant put similar pressure on Mayor O'Dwyer. The mayor's response ultimately left the Black community further alienated. He appointed Franklin Delano Roosevelt Jr. to head a commission of respected citizens who would investigate allegations of police brutality against Black citizens.
And you know what happened when they would investigate it? Not a damn thing. Keep reading.
During the formation of the commission, however, 3 Blacks were killed under circumstances which seemed to involve white police.
Say that again?
3 Blacks were killed under circumstances which seemed to involve white police.
The same things that this commission was authorized to investigate. Keep going.
The commission promised to get to the bottom of the crimes, but came up empty.
Listen, we were created to investigate crimes and issues associated to white police officers and Black residents. 3 different cases came up, 3 Black people unalive, all involving white police officers. No foul. Keep going.
This left Black New Yorkers increasingly distrustful of the NYPD.
And this is still an ongoing issue. You know, it's a fact that Black and Hispanic people still distrust the New York Police Department. And it's rightfully so. The history, let's not even talk, like everyone that's alive right now in 2024, if you weren't born before 2000, you're out of this equation just for right now. Everyone born before 2000 can use their own personal examples. Grandparents born in the 20s and 30s, 40s and 50s, our parents growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s, us growing up in the 80s and 90s, we can all attest to many events that either had happened to us, happened to a loved one, or read about, learned about in the media, the newspapers, that give us valid reasons that we don't trust the NYPD.
Right.
It was happening back then, and it's still happening today. Keep going.
New York's Black community challenged not only their underrepresentation in police work, but the brutal practices of officers themselves, which remained a cogent issue throughout the 40s and 50s. For some black leaders, hiring black police officers was the key to preventing brutality.
Nope. You read this already. Go down to the next paragraph.
Salakia.
It's okay.
Further alienating blacks' faith in the NYPD was the discovery in the early 50s of a covert deal between the NYPD and the FBI.
Say that again.
Further alienating blacks' faith in the NYPD.
So another issue that decreased our trust in the NYPD, that brought us further apart from the NYPD is the what?
The discovery in the
us finding out the fact, the truth. Keep going.
Of a covert deal between a covert deal.
A secret deal, an under the table deal that took place, that was put in place, that is in order between who?
The NYPD and the FBI.
Listen. We know this. And we know that this was an actual fact, and we're going to prove it. Keep going.
Exempting New York policemen from routine questioning by FBI agents in civil rights cases involving charges of police brutality.
So this deal, whenever there was a federal investigation of civil rights involving police brutality, there was a deal that was made between the NYPD and the FBI that the deal did not allow for the police of the NYPD to be questioned by the FBI. Keep going.
Despite substantial evidence confirming the clandestine agreement.
Even though there was so much evidence that was being put forward to prove that this is what's actually going on and that this was true. Keep going.
Mayor and Pelletieri and
the mayor
and Commissioner Monahan
and the commissioner
emphatically denied that such a deal existed.
They kept saying, we're crazy. No such deal exists. This is your imagination. Who told you this lie that there's some deal between the FBI and the NYPD? Huh? Keep going.
Shortly after their stalwart defense, the department immediately appointed the first black deputy commissioner, a tacit acknowledgement of their guilt.
So you know what they did after denying? They said, you know what? Let's just hire a black person, make him deputy commissioner. And this was a form of like a silent acknowledgement that they're lying, that we're right and that they're lying. Keep going.
In 1952, Assistant Attorney General James McInerney conceded that such an agreement had been in effect.
What?
In 1952, Assistant Attorney General James McInerney conceded that such an agreement had been in effect.
So you mean to tell me that all these months and years that we were saying that the NYPD and the FBI are working together, they're not questioning and interrogating police officers involved in civil rights abuses against minorities? We've been given proof after proof, and we've been denied and told that it's not true, just to finally say that it actually was true. Do you really expect us to believe an organization that lies? Do you honestly believe black and Hispanic people to trust the FBI? No, we don't trust the FBI. We don't trust the CIA. They do not serve the benefits of black and Hispanic people. Keep going.
Likewise, organizing activity could make an officer vulnerable to discipline by police management. The mostly white rank and file members of the Policemen's Benevolent Association were as vulnerable to similar intrusions into their politics as black police officers.
Actually, you can pause it right there. That's it for today's class. That's it. You want to know why black and Hispanic people don't trust the NYPD? We just went over a bunch of reasons why. You want to know why we don't trust politics in America? We went over a bunch of reasons why. You want to know why black and Hispanic people don't trust the FBI? Because there have been too many there have been too many instances where the truth was being asked of, and lies were given. And then the truth finally came out that we were correct the entire time. Race and politics during the 1940s and 50s and 60s was a humongous underlying, was not even underlying, was at the forefront of the lives of Black and Hispanic people here in New York City, in Harlem. We feared being able to go out in the streets and being harassed by the police, just like we were in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s doing stop and frisk. We feared police brutality in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, just like we still fear police brutality now. We feared police discrimination in the 40s and in the 50s and in the 60s, just like we still fear police discrimination today. And if it wasn't for these reports and these articles that are not known for us to have access to, right? Because what person, let's just say, what common Black and Hispanic person would ever stumble upon this information unless purposely seeking it out? Unless they were purposely trying to find evidence and trying to learn about the relationships of Black and Hispanic people and the New York Police Department or the FBI or the mayor and governor of New York. The mayor of New York City and the governor of New York State. Unless you are purposely and deliberately seeking this information out, you're not going to learn about it in elementary school and junior high school and high school. You might not even learn about it in college unless you're taking certain classes that deal with race relations and politics and race. But fortunately for you tuning in, and for anyone that's going to end up watching this video in the months and years to come, you can always rely on the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge to bring you information that is not readily available and accessible to you unless you're going to look for it.
Right.
And the reason why is because we love our people. We know that we do not need the New York Police Department or any type of law enforcement to police Black and Hispanic people, when all we have to do, the solution is for Black and Hispanic people to obey God's laws. If we just simply obey God's laws, there is no need for the police department in your city. And it starts with you, it starts with me, it starts with us turning to these laws, statutes, and commandments of God and adhering to them, teaching our children them, living our lives and treating each other according to these laws, statutes, and commandments. And we can get rid of this history of police brutality. And if this is something that you want, if you don't want the police to be patrolling your community, if you don't want that fear that you get when you see the police driving behind you in your car, come into the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, and we will show you and teach you and guide you on how to obey God, on how to be God-abiding citizens, so you don't have to worry about the law enforcement of America. And with that, I'm Priest Ashagapan of the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Started out of 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York. And under Commanding General Yohana, we will continue to strive to teach Black, Hispanic, and Native American people who they are, and continue to help them be God-abiding citizens. Shalom.